Donkey Kong Bananza, Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Silksong. These are 4 guaranteed locks for Game of the Year nominations, but there's 2 more slots. What could they be? Well, it's not Blueprints. It pains me to say it, but since Silksong came out, I just don't see any other indie taking that slot. Silksong was a once-in-a-lifetime gaming experience. It had 7 years of development. Fans were so starved and ravenous for any morsel of news that the sheer anticipation drove them to a meme frenzy, just skunging around everywhere. And when Silksong finally launched, it crashed Steam for 4 hours. I can't remember the last time any game did that, let alone an indie. Most importantly, Jeff Keighley himself is a Silksong stan. For example, he couldn't help bringing it up at Gamescom despite Team Cherry doing their own separate direct totally on their own. So yeah, Silksong is 100% going to be nominated for Game of the Year. Now, historically, the Game of the Year award has only 1 indie nomination. If they were to break that this year, and that's a very big if, the second indie game would most likely be Hades 2. It's sitting at a massive 94 on Metacritic, the highest of any other game we'll talk about today. And the first Hades game was nominated for Game of the Year back in 2020, so there's some precedent. It was a bold choice for Supergiant Games to launch Hades 2 the same month as Silksong. They spent a year and a half in early access, so they could have easily pushed it to something like December, which would qualify it for next year's Game of the Year. Hey, what can I say? Greek mythology is full of hubris. Actually, if you want to talk about games that came out last year but qualify for this year's 2025, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That game was featured heavily by the Game Awards last year. Harrison Ford even came out and gave a whole thing. But getting back on topic, I do think that Silksong is going to be the only indie game. And to be clear, I did enjoy both Silksong and Hades 2 a lot. I think they're fantastic games, but they're sequels. That's why it's so painful to see a truly original game like Blueprints just going to get tossed aside. This game is so insane. It's a puzzle, roguelike, Metroidvania, epistolary, atmospheric board game adventure with gorgeous visuals. Now, to be fair, part of the problem here is that Blueprints is only released in English. This game is full of wordplay and puns that only make sense in the Queen's tongue. This limits its reach on the global market. Believe it or not, the Game Awards do have a process for selecting Game of the Year nominations. It involves polling over 100 different media outlets, most of which are in English, but many of which are not. It took Blueprints 8 years to make, and there's still the big free Digiblocks update to work on, so I think the creator, Tonda Ross, can live with this outcome because it's very unlikely he's localizing it to any other language. But personally, I have spent the past 6 months of my life making guides and challenges for this game that I love dearly. So yes, I am absurdly biased, but I just feel like Blueprints was an experience that will inspire game design for decades to come. And so it is my personal Game of the Year, not even nomination, just full stop. But you know, it's also not Jeff Keighley's Game of the Year. They say that he called the Balatro developer Local Thunk to congratulate him when he got nominated for Game of the Year, so maybe Tonda Ross could at least get a sweet Keighley call apologizing for this grave injustice. Someone who doesn't need a Keighley call, though, is Hideo Kojima. These two are peas in a pod, so there's no question Death Stranding 2 is getting nominated. A better question is if Metal Gear Solid 3 Delta will get nominated. I'd wager no, but stranger things have happened. Like, how about a total dark horse contender rising to the top? Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, kind of a bad name, but it did launch right to the top of Metacritic. This French-infused turn-based RPG was conceptually and mechanically a breath of fresh air. It's the kind of game that churns out passionate fans. If I were a betting man, I'd call Expedition 33 the front runner for Game of the Year, or at least best soundtrack of the year, and it's a rare case of a AA game exceeding expectations. Now, Donkey Kong Bananza might look like a AA game, but this is Nintendo. Their gameplay is the top banana. Nintendo does have a long history with the Game Awards, and there's no doubt that their flagship platformer is getting nominated. Interestingly, Game Freak, who is affiliated but not technically part of Nintendo, has no history with the Game Awards. I don't think Pokemon Legends Z-A is getting nominated. Now, at the time of recording, it hasn't come out, and it could certainly be a great game. Being on the Switch 2 means it will probably have decent performance, unlike all the issues the Switch 1 Pokemon games had.
Is that the Void?
But don't count Game Freak out, you guys. I mean, they're only responsible for the single most profitable franchise in human history, and they have zero incentive to fix their glitchy messes. But in positive news, let's talk about a game that's messy in an artistic and intentional way, Silent Hill F. This is the first new entry in a very long time. Obviously, Silent Hill 2 was a great success, but that was technically a remake, and I will say that F is getting tons of hype, but there is an awkward thing we've got to discuss. Last last year, the Silent Hill 2 remake came out and it did very, very well, but it wasn't nominated for Game of the Year. To remind you, Elden Ring DLC was nominated for Game of the Year. Downloadable content. So it's not like the list was stacked. Silent Hill 2 could have and should have gotten the nod, but it didn't. So I'm somehow less confident that Silent Hill F has that locked up. How about a game that I totally forgot about, and maybe you did too? Assassin's Creed Shadows. I don't know, it just didn't speak to me. The only Assassin's Creed game to ever get nominated in the entire Game Awards history was Odyssey, which genuinely deserved it. By most accounts, Assassin's Creed Shadows was mid. That being said, if you're looking for a Japanese-inspired pick, I'd go for Ghost of Yotei. Some open-world nonsense, these tend to do pretty well with the Doritos Pope. And while we're bashing AAA, not a single Call of Duty game has ever been nominated. In fact, isn't it strange that 2 Call of Duty games came out in 1 year? I don't understand. I also don't care for first-person shooters, so pretty much out of the loop here, but anecdotally, my friends pretty much play COD for zombies, so my guess is that these games aren't exactly breaking the mold. If you put an axe to my head and told me to pick the 6 most likely nominees for Game of the Year, I would go Donkey Kong Bonanza, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Death Stranding 2, Silksong, Ghost of Yotei, and then probably Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Again, these are not my own favorite games of the year. These are just what I think are most likely to be nominated. I personally would love to see an extra indie game finally get added because let's be real, none of these AAAs did anything incredible this year, while Blueprints, Silksong, Hades 2, and Expedition 33 all brought some incredible heat, even if several of them were sequels. In fact, I'm working on my top indie games of the entire year. Every single indie game that I played all ranked together. So if there's any hidden gems or even not so hidden gems that you loved from 2025 indies, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to play it. The Game Awards are fun to think about, but there's no substitute for soul, and you will only find that with smaller, more artistically driven teams. As always, I'm Scoutmaster Demi. Thanks for caring for our camp, and we'll see you around.